Live from SABC studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, welcome to this midweek edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko, and on the show tonight, we shine the spotlight on the violent protests that have gripped Tembisa over the past few days. In particular, the cost to the communities and the country whenever a people are pushed to the abyss and no one seems to care. Gauteng local government MEC MEC Maile met with the Tembisa community today. He talks to us about what he heard and saw and what he's going to do about it. Omhle Njingila is from Right to Protest, a coalition of local government organizations that aim to advance and support the realization of the constitutional right to protest as enshrined in Section 17 of the Constitution of the Republic. Struggle veteran and psychologist Professor Seth Cooper is the president of the Pan-African Psychology Union. All of them my guests for this evening's episode of the Watchdog. Unfortunately, Shanila Mohammed, the Africa Director of Amnesty International, a global movement of millions of people committed to fighting injustice across the world, will unfortunately no longer be able to join us. She had a little misfortune a short while ago. But the program continues. A few days ago, Tembisa was declared a no-go area. While an easy calm has since been restored in the area, pockets of protest action continue. The violent protest erupted following the Ekurhuleni mayor's failure to meet residents last week. The mayor today descended on the township, and so did local government MEC MEC Maile. Our reporter was also there.
Conflicting reports.
We can confirm that there's one of the residents who died earlier in the morning, and circumstances that led to that, according to the reports that we're getting from our officers on the ground, is that that particular individual were actually attacking officers with a petrol bomb.
Today, a visibly angry Lebogang Maile emerged from a meeting with Peter Mulonyana's family. It's alleged Mulonyana died at the hands of an unapologetic police officer who also tried to run over the mother. Maile has condemned the incident, saying acts of racism must be dealt with decisively.
He was shot by a white police officer who had no shame, who boldly declared that he indeed shot him. And the same guy, we are told that nearly ran over the mother of the deceased, and this makes us angry because this is nothing else but a sheer act of racism.
Maile has called on those with proof of an alleged third force to come forward. This following allegations of attempts to destabilize the multi-party administration in the area.
When you get riots like we've had here that turn violent and that actually do not even have the mandate of the people at heart anymore, that is absolutely unacceptable. So IPAD will come in, they will do their investigations, and then from there we will take the appropriate mechanisms.
Protests still continue in parts of Tembisa despite various meetings with officials. This has sparked calls for the provincial and national government to intervene. Mbalendle Ntetwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
MEC Maile joins us on the line. Good evening, MEC. Thanks very much for your time. First, perhaps, why you decided to go to Tembisa today? MEC, can you hear us? Okay, he doesn't seem to be hearing us at all, but he did go to Tembisa today, joined, as you saw in that insert earlier, by the mayor of Ekurhuleni as well. I understand it was a fact-finding mission, but I wanted him to say it in his own words as to why, MEC, you decided to go to Tembisa today. In fact, it's the reason we started a little later than we should have, because that line we kept losing him as we were trying to establish his line a little earlier. MEC, I don't know if you can hear us now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, what I was asking was why you decided to go to Tembisa today.
As the provincial government, and in this case, as the MEC responsible for cooperative governance, I felt that it's important that we facilitate, coordinate, and provide support to the municipality. As you know, that our responsibility is to provide support, oversight, and coordinate and facilitate. So we went there, as we have seen that there's instability, there were acts of violence, the public assets have been touched, and there's also about 4 people who died. And it can't just be business as usual. So we had to meet with the stakeholders, understand rather the issues. We invited the mayor who came to the meeting that we had with the stakeholders in the morning, and we also received a briefing from the police, and we visited the bereaved families to convey our condolences, but to also get first-hand information on what transpired.
Let's start with the people of Tembisa. What did they tell you?
What they told us is what they've been telling the municipality and what they are not happy about. There's issues of billing. As you know, they receive wrong bills. The municipality is estimating, instead of coming physically to check the meters, there's issues of tariffs that are high, and these tariffs which are high affects them because they can't afford. Some of them are unemployed. But there's also the issue about indigency policy, which has been changed by the municipality. Though the municipality gives a different explanation, and they're saying that change was meant to enhance it. Unfortunately, the change has affected the citizens negatively, and they cannot afford. They are also complaining about the 100 kilowatt, I think that was given previously by the ANC-led, council. The coalition has scrapped it because it says it's not affordable and all that. So there are a lot of issues that they're raising, including the issues of how the municipality evaluates their houses. So it's a mirror of issues that they've raised. The mayor has got their memorandum, and all those issues are issues that require the municipality to respond. There might be one or two which requires national or province to work with the municipality, and we've committed to facilitate and coordinate in relation to those matters.
Well, I mean, we had invited the mayor. I mean, it looked like she was going to come, but that, of course, never materialized. But from the responses that she gave at that public meeting, I mean, what were those? What were the municipality's responses to all those issues, or at least some of the issues that the people raised?
Well, there were two meetings. The first two sets of meetings. The first one was with the local leaders, those who are leading the protest, and the councillors. And then we went to the families. The last leg was in the public meeting, which the mayor did not join because she felt it's not necessary for her to go there, because she will meet apparently with the community on Friday, and she'll be better equipped to respond to them. And we said that even if you don't have all the answers, but the fact that we are around Tembisa and the community knows about our presence, it would be good that we make an appearance, even if we tell them what they don't want to hear. But we should tell the truth at all the times and update them on how far are we, because leadership can't be afraid and be scared to face the people, because it is the people who have voted all of us into office.
And what did she say to that?
We must at all the times explain to them.
And what did she say to that?
Well, she was adamant that she will meet them on Friday. And I think we respect her decision. And we communicated that to the public, that the mayor is not able to come here because she feels that she will come. And that obviously angered the people. They started chanting that they want electricity. And I think we could have managed it better if we were all there and explain that what is happening to solve these issues. And I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just giving an account of what happened today.
You obviously didn't agree with her, even though you respected her decision, as you're saying.
Yeah, well, we went there as the provincial government and we invited her. So she probably felt that she would want to have her own meeting. So, yeah, I wouldn't want to dwell much on that. But if I was her advisor, I would have advised her to attend that meeting. I mean, we've been to meetings where we've been booed, we've been chased away because people are angry. In fact, people must direct their anger towards us. Where should they direct their anger if they can't direct it towards us?
As far as
not...
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, also, I mean, as far as you know, whether it's billing or high tariffs, changes to the indigent policy, house evaluations, are all those issues new? In other words, are these problems that only came with this new administration, as far as you know?
There's tariff hikes every year. They've always been there. But the issue is how do you manage them, whether you consult or not, because people feel that they are not consulted. But there's also different types of tariffs. There are tariffs that are dependent on external organizations like Rainwater and Eskom, because they buy electricity from them, and therefore it will influence how they charge. But there are tariffs that are entirely in the control of the municipality, like waste collection, graves, how much you must pay when you have a funeral. those you can manage as a municipality, and they can be a bit lower and all that. And ultimately, it's about consulting and explaining to the citizens. So the point I'm making is not for the first time, but they've never gotten out of hand like this. It means there's something that has not been done right now. Evaluations are done regularly, you know. The billing, there's always been a big issue everywhere. But the citizens were saying the attitude of the municipal workers is not befitting of public servants and all that. So I think citizens understand that there is no perfect system, but they want to be satisfied that there is a will to address them. There is a commitment, and there must be a concerted effort to make them satisfied and make them understand what are the issues and how to deal with them.
There is a suggestion that what we're seeing is being fueled by pronouncements coming from the opposition, read ANC, which lost power in November or after the November election. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm struggling to understand who in the ANC and when. And I've asked a question to the journalists that asked me this question, because unfortunately, the people who made the accusation did not have the courage to raise it in my presence, because I've questioned them. Who has said that? When did they say it? Do you have the proof? I'm here in my capacity as the MEC of Cocta. I've got an obligation legally to act against anybody who would have incited violence, who is calling for instability in the municipalities. And I'm telling you now, I will act if we are given proof. I can tell you that whoever raises that issue, they are trying to run away from the genuine concerns and grievances that the citizens are raising. It's very simplistic, it's very reckless, and it's inconsistent with the ethos that some of our friends always preach of transparency, accountability, because the citizens have got the right to protest, they've got the right to express their views, they have the right to contradict the government of the day. We are contradicted every day. We are insulted every day. In fact, today I was insulted by an MMC of Action SA in that municipality when he's supposed to answer a question, because there's a citizen who has been murdered by a Metro Police officer. And when the family described what happened, and we asked what was the response of the municipality, we were told that that MMC was sitting somewhere, wherever he was, he never visited the family, and he made a conclusion that the police killed an innocent person who he claims was a threat to the police. But when we are receiving an explanation from the witnesses and the family, you can detect that the accounts that the family is giving is clearly contradictory to what the MMC say. And we challenged him to say, what kind of an MMC speaks without facts, without going on the ground and understanding what is happening. So he decided to held insults, talk about Naupe, all sorts of things. And if that's the quality of MMCs we have, then we are concerned. And that's why it's an issue that personally I thought, well, the chap is out of depth, is overwhelmed, and maybe he was desperate to say something, and maybe it was something I would have just let go. But in hindsight, I think the chap must be taught a lesson and understand that we are not playing games here. It is people's lives. We have been given serious responsibilities to govern. I would have to instruct my attorney to get him to withdraw and apologize in public. Because if the chap wants to exchange insults and all that, he must invite me to Shibin, and we do that not in public platforms where we are given a responsibility as public representatives to solve serious problems that are affecting our people. The Tembisa situation is serious. People have died. There are families who have lost their loved ones. There's a police officer, unfortunately, we are told he's white, who even wanted to run over the mother of the deceased. And yet the MMC does not see anything wrong. And I'm told it belongs to the Action SA. And I will write a letter to the leader of Action SA and this chap, because we can't have people who are playful, who don't understand the importance of the task at hand and the seriousness of the situation we are facing, and they choose to hurl insults instead of giving answers.
Okay, quick one, MEC. In your conversations, or the conversation, however brief it may have been, that you had with Mayor Tanya Campbell, did she at any point raise the issue or question of perhaps the opposition adding fuel to the fire by the statements that the ANC made?
Not at all. In fact, I was asked the question in her presence. She was sitting next to me. She said something different.
Okay.
Fortunately, all those who were in camera, they were captured there. So when people have views, they must also have courage to express those views anywhere, especially if they believe that their courage, their accusations are valid.
Okay, let's leave it there. And thank you for your time, MEC for Human Settlements and Kokta Lebohang Maile, calling, of course, on all those who are charged with the responsibility of managing this crisis, but also delivering on the demands that the communities are making to actually make sure that they indeed do their jobs. We did, by the way, invite Mayor Tanya Campbell, without success, obviously. After the break, our panel of human rights and political activists looks at the cost to communities and their country whenever a people are pushed to the abyss and no one seems to care. The Tembisa death toll currently stands at 4. Linda Shabalala, who was the second to die, was apparently shot inside his yard in front of people that were close to him. Eyewitnesses, our teams on the ground in Tembisa have been speaking to, say residents are still traumatized after witnessing the shootings in the area. City of Ekurhuleni officials, meanwhile, continue with the exercise of assessing the extent of the damage after municipal buildings and cars were touched by angry residents. This is where two of the 4 victims actually died. Well, I am now joined by Omhle Chingila from Right to Protest, a coalition of organizations that aim to advance and support the realization of the constitutional right to protest, as enshrined in Section 17 of the Constitution of the Republic. Good evening, Omhle.
Good evening, Ria, and good evening to your listeners. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you. And here in studio, I'm joined by struggle veteran and psychologist Professor Seth Cooper, who is the president of the Pan-African Psychology Union. Our third guest could not join us this evening, Shanila Mohammed from Amnesty International. She had a little misfortune a little earlier, just before the program started. I'm going to start with you, Omhle, if I may. I mean, you listened to that conversation I was having with MEC Maile. I mean, your organization stands firm in saying communities have a right to air their grievances and demand attention from politicians. I don't know what you made of the things that he had to say, who he was holding responsible or blaming. Just your thoughts, having listened to what he had to say.
I think what MEC said about that the only place where communities can direct their anger is towards politicians in this country, because most of the social unrest that we have seen during the week, but that is also taking place across South Africa, lies in the deep-seated socio-economic issues that the country is facing right now. But these are not socio-economic issues that have just come out of nowhere. It's been building up in post-apartheid South Africa. And I think there's been a lot of blame game amongst different political parties, despite their offices and their offices that they've taken in government. And there has been a lack of urgency in addressing issues that community protests present. And we've seen across the country how community protests, I don't believe, or we as an organization do not believe that communities protest with an intent to be violent. This is literally the last resort after a string of engagements with municipalities, with provincial governments, and with national government. And then after comes then violence that we see in most community protests. So there's really been a lack of urgency in redistributing resources such as electricity and water. These are public resources that we are talking about. And there's just been a lack of accountability from provincial governments to national governments, and everybody passing around who should be accountable continues to anger communities and has placed communities in the places that which they are in. And I think what MEC forgot to mention is that the framing of violence in itself in South Africa has become quite dangerous. Protesters have been painted as aggressors, but these are really victims of human rights violations that the government has been doing since for a while in post-apartheid Africa, South Africa. And it goes back into the psychology of the systematic violence that we are presented with every day, daily, especially for indigenous communities, poor communities who their issues and their demands never get addressed.
I mean, what you're saying is quite poignant, especially because, I mean, it may well be that this particular protest was sparked by, as he was saying, billing, high tariffs, indigent policy changes, house evaluations, and all of that. But fact of the matter is that these protests have been with us for a good couple of decades now, and it's the same issues everywhere. And mind you, I mean, a great majority of these municipalities are in fact governed or have been governed by the ANC.
And that's very true. And I think the change of leadership, of course, is frustrating the ruling party. But they might be also at this moment using this using this as some political weapon. I'm not sure of that, and I don't think I have the right proper standing to speak on it. But what we see is that what we are really seeing in community protests, that actually the ISS has a protest and a violence monitoring system that they've started in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, which showed that in between the years of 2012 and 2014, 8 community protests were happening per day. That's close to almost 900 community protests that happened in between August of 2013 to January of 2014. And this number has not decreased, but has really increased. And COVID-19 has exacerbated this number because the governance of this country has really put our country under a lot of economic and social pressure. And this is not just a protest that has been sparked by a change in tariff. It's a protest that has really been sparked by the fact that people's material conditions are not changing in South Africa, and communities need an outlet for them to express themselves and to get government's attention and response to attend to their needs of unemployment, GPV in the country, crime in the country, the decrease of the quality of education in this country. So there's a lot of things that go into protest, but we also know that protest is the one thing that is essential for us to enter into exercising every other right that is under the Constitution. Okay. It's not only important for people to use protest to express themselves, but it's just a historical accountability tool that must be protected in our country.
Professor Cooper, I hope I'm not going to bake it this my preface to your question and say only 4 people died. But from what our teams on the ground have been saying, from their conversations with people in the community, especially those who witnessed some of the deaths, these people are traumatized because to watch your loved one, whether it was the neighbor or your relatives, being shot in front of you, and from what you could see, these people did nothing. That brings a lot of trauma to those people who witnessed, such a thing, isn't it?
Those persons have not lost their humanity. Our leadership has. And what Omhle Ntshingila has said is absolutely correct in terms of her analysis and her understanding of where at least a quarter century of such protests, the word service delivery sort of arose in the late 1990s period, where somehow it got classified as service delivery. But steadily, people's rights, steadily people's involvement in this system has been denuded. And so we have a society that's got the worst statistics. And you can name them from most violent without war, to unemployment, to the lowest employment in the world. The violence statistics are shocking. Not only violence against women, which is almost normative in the society, but children. And daily, our kids watch this. All the warning signs were there. I mean, I saw the Tembisa Community Forum raise the issue of this protest is going to happen. We will align with this protest, but we're against violence and so on. So the people in charge were well aware, and it's been brewing for some time now, to allow this to happen. What has gone wrong with the people who are placed in charge when they forget their constituencies and only remember them in the negative when this happens, or only remember them when they're busy canvassing like they did before November last year. Subsequent to that, what's happened? Very little. People's conditions have gotten worse. We've had the pandemic, we've had more corruption, and people witness this. People see this. They see those enabled amongst themselves, like those who have a job in government service at whatever level, when others don't. So lots of questions emerge, and I think it's about time that we actually evaluated our democracy, because our democracy has tended to exclude the majority and include only a minority that are well-heeled or that are party apparatchiks, and that shouldn't be happening.
But what goes on in the mind of a politician who willfully ignores the cries of the very people that they are supposed to serve? Is it because they don't care? Is it because there are no consequences? Is it because perhaps we've become meek and timid and therefore never really, yes, we may protest here and there or raise our voice today, but forget tomorrow when the same politician comes back to ask for our vote?
Well, all of the above, but also the choice in political parties for their leadership leaves a hell of a lot to be desired. And this is across the board. We don't have excellence in political leadership. We actually have barrel scraping. We have, why are the Omhles not the persons speaking for us in specific constituencies? Why do we have these jaded, and age has got nothing to do with it, when they get in there and they're young, they fall into the same trap of compliance, because if you rattle the boat a little bit, you won't get chosen. The bright ones, the so-called clever blacks, don't get chosen. The compliant, servile, yabas men and women get chosen, and we've been tutored well by the previous system. The current system has somewhat perfected it, because you don't have effectively one person, one vote, accounting for the person you chose. You're choosing parties. And so to get through the walls that separate ordinary people from their representatives, to the political parties, to the council, to a wasted provincial system, to national MPs, all of that comes at a great cost.
But what is it about the political system that gives us, that kind of
mediocrity rules? If you good, and we've got our colleague now on this show, if they don't count, unless you're prepared to toe the line, if you raise the questions that need to be asked, you are looked at as a troublemaker. And remember, again, apartheid taught us well. Because if you did those things, you'd be called a communist, you'd be called a black power activist, or somebody out to destroy the system. Now, correctly, as Omhle says, we have made victims into people who become villains, and they ought not to be. Tembisa is a much more settled community than some of the other communities. Our pictures show that, but we simply don't. The Sobukwe called them voting cattle. We just vote so that we can get an outcome, self-serving. We fight about positions, but not about people. And that needs to change. All that Batopile sloganeering needs to change with each councillor, with each MPL, with each MP and the respective government. If they can truly do that, and that's a challenge, if they can truly do that, not hide in those places where there's huge security with blue lights, then they will realize that we've left our people behind, and our people matter more than the politicians, more than those whose salaries we pay.
Omhle, the people's rights to a protest is enshrined or to express their dissatisfaction in our constitution. But with politicians' devil-may-care attitudes, how do we ensure that that right continues to be protected and that avenue isn't closed, but at the same time ensure that the unfortunate things that then happen do not happen? Because I'm arguing here that we cannot rely on the politicians to stop that from happening, because they are the people responsible for the mess in the first place. What do we do as communities?
Here at Right to Protest, we try our best to educate people on their right to protest, but the responsibility that comes with the protest. And we go through the RGA, we go through Section 17, and we really educate people on the right to protest, how to protest peacefully, and how to also engage with governments, engage with your municipality or corporations before you actually get into a protest. The problem comes in when you can't deter people's frustrations and anger, and citizens will do what they need to do or feel is what's right for them at that time. And the only way you can engage with people, if you build a relationship with people. And it's hard for governments to come in now and step in and want to pause or contain violent protest, because that social contract is no longer there for governments to do that. We as Chapter 9 organizations can only go as far as educating people about their right to protest. But once a protest starts, then it's out of our hands and it's out of our control. And this is why then the state also responds with so much violence, in arbitrary violence, when it comes to protest. And the only containment they can be is a continuous dialogue between all civil society organizations, communities, and governments. But if governments doesn't want to play a part, it then becomes really frustrating and really hard to promote and protect protest, because we won't lie, the civic space is also shrinking because there's a lot of stifling of activism through brutality that we've seen the government displaying in our communities as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that brutality, because that was my next question to Professor Cooper, because some of the justification for the deaths is that people are violent or were aggressive, and you psychologists from our undergrad studies excuse me, say that aggression is behavior intended to cause harm, and it couldn't be that. That's not what those people set out to do.
No, they didn't, and they've been made violent by the system. Violence is a learned behavior, and if you see those images all around us, our kids are at huge risk. Our screens, social media, and other forms of media, get out there to our kids. Have we forgotten the videos that have been doing the rounds with children in schools doing this? It's adults behaving badly. It's lack of appropriate leadership. And I'd like to point out that the Provincial Commissioner of Police, General Mawela, was public order head. And he addressed Parliament on exactly some of the statistics that Umhle is raising a few years ago. And he said that we can't contain what is a political, and to Becky Tele's credit, he said to me, it's socioeconomic a few years ago. Now, when they're in those positions, surely they should be heard in their own circles, and they should make a case for others to understand the scale of the problem. I'm afraid we, at the stage where violence has become normative, we're going to perpetuate violence, we're going to explain away our violence because we say somebody else acted aggressively. Where is that ability to talk to people who are our people, not somebody else's people? They're not aliens. They belong here. They ought to be part of us, but we treat them as outcasts. that kind of neo-apartheid attitude needs to change, and it needs to change with key leadership in communities. They ought to be there with people in those times of need. What's very rich also is that politicians fill the community protest space, and our media tends to gravitate to them, and they make these resounding statements, but when they're in power, they do very little.
Get to do anything about it. Professor Cooper, Omhle Nchingila, thanks to both of you for your time and insights this evening. Whenever a people are pushed to the abyss and no one seems to give a damn, there's a cost to both the communities but also to our country. That's our program for this evening. To join us again tomorrow night, same time.